Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today I'll be able to talk to you about my first impressions on Age of Sigmar Realms of Ruin. So what you're seeing here is my gameplay where I'm playing as the Uruk Crawl Boys. We're going to talk about a few things here and there. I've got to give you a few disclaimers first. Firstly, I didn't record this footage. This footage was actually recorded by members of Frontier. That means that any audio, visual, on all the other types of settings are not mine, but the gameplay is 100% me. The general incompetence that you know and love from me, yeah, that's all here. As I was invited to a remote event to be able to play 3 battles, where I managed to play a little bit as the Stormcast Eternals, the Crawl Boys, and also 1 campaign mission. Everything you will be seeing on screen is early in development, so things will be subject to change. Things could have even changed by the time that you're able to play on the open beta on the 7th of this month. Now, since this was remote, I unfortunately had to play via a program called Parsec, which led to a few little bit of lag issues here and there. So if you see me jumping around a little bit, it's because there was lag and I was trying to actually get into the game. But yeah, I'm playing against the developer here. Unfortunately, it's not a full match. I'll let you know directly here. It's because the developer crashed. This was the last match that I was playing. The first one wasn't really good enough to show, considering that it was my first ever match. So obviously mistakes were made by myself and the influencer, I believe, that I was playing against. And the second one crashed quite early on. But we do have 28 minutes of footage with the Uruk Crawl Boys. So we're going to talk about a few things. First up, I'll talk about the campaign mission, as that's something that they've not given us footage, we're not able to show, which is a bit unfortunate because I would have loved to talk about the campaign mission itself a little bit more. I will say though that it is fully voiced, everything seems to be working as intended. I've not really encountered any bugs when I played that campaign mission. It does have major Dawn of War 2 vibes, with going to different locations. There's little beats every now and then with a little bit of a cutscene. But it's heavily scripted. It is a proper campaign. It's not one of these things where you're going to be feeling a Dawn of War freestyle thing. This is actually proper campaign, which, to be honest, I was kind of worried at the beginning. I thought, well, this might be more Dawn of War freestyle, but no, it's more on Game 2 standards. It wasn't a very long mission itself. I was playing as the Stormcast Eternals. I'm not sure if the other factions will have their own campaign beats. But yeah, it was decent enough as a introduction. That's how it felt to me. It felt like an introduction to the faction. It felt like an introduction to gameplay. So it wasn't too bad. Now, what we can talk about more is the battles. You see, I was able to play 3 battles, like I said. There were a few crashes, but that's pretty much the fault of playing as a remote program rather than actually downloading a build myself. This is usually how some companies handle the stuff. The battle map is the same, so I've been using and playing through the same battle map all the time. One thing I will say, unfortunately, is even though I am kind of well versed with these types of games, you know, like I played a lot of Warcraft 3, I still play a lot of Warcraft 3, Dawn of War 2, all that type of stuff. Since this was a remote event, everyone was using the same computer, which meant that I could not change around the hotkeys and stuff, meaning that I was kind of out of my element. I didn't have time to look at settings and so on. I believe, well, nobody was able to look at settings, which put me obviously at a bit of a disadvantage versus the developer, let's be honest there. But it's more of the case of I'll be able to grasp it more during the open beta, because that way I could actually have my hotkeys. If you've played RTS games before, yeah, you're going to have to just tune it up to your specifications. Now, when it comes to the map, so you can see a pretty basic map. There's 3 main control points, loads of smaller control points across the map, 1 camp for myself, 1 camp for the enemy. This is the only map I've been able to play through. I'm not sure if they have any other maps ready, and I don't know if other maps will be playable throughout the open beta, but this is pretty much the standard one. It's pretty well balanced, you know. 1 point closer to the enemy base, 1 point closer to mine, and then 1 firmly in the middle. Basically, the way that you win this game, or at least that's the way I've been playing, is you take more control points than the enemy, and you whittle down their points down to 0. If you have 2 points and they have 1, you won't lose any points, but they will. So having the majority is the best way to go. Now, you're going to have map control here, so this is something that you're going to learn as you play, and it's very important because even the minor control points are quite important, as even though they don't really whittle down the enemy control points, you use them to upgrade. You use them to build them up. You'll be able to get more resources. Resources are very important here, as you would have noticed already, that you've got two main resources, and they're used for abilities, they're used for buildings, they're used for upgrades, they're used for everything. Pretty much both resources will be actively used throughout literally every mechanic that you have available here, barring, I believe, the retreat function. So yeah, it's one of these things. The matches are fairly fast-paced, I must say. Obviously, when it comes to this, it's taken a while to get quite a lot of combat out, but I'm imagining that the developer was trying to be nice to me, considering that I was playing against someone who has been working in the program, you know, rather than some random dude that's never played before. So, yeah, there would be a bit of an unfair advantage. So, what I've learned from this game is it's kind of Companies of Heroes style. So it's got that Company of Heroes vibe too. Very Dawn of War 2 in certain places too. So it feels pretty good as an RTS, I must say. There's a feeling of real-time tactics and real-time strategy. The map looks great, and the other one that I played through the campaign was also quite good looking too. This is the Realm of Gur, so everything's supposed to look fairly bestial. I'm not too sure if we're going to see other map varieties, or if everything's going to follow the same color palette, considering, well, again, Realm of Gur, this is an Age of Sigmar place. But, yeah, you do get pretty good visuals. The units look fantastic. They fight really well. You are on a kind of triangular type of combat where, you know, sword beats bow, bow beats horse in a sense. It's pretty classic, it's pretty standard, so what you need to do is get to learn your units, because knowing what counters what is quite useful. And yeah, I mean, combat feels really, really good. You can scroll in as much as possible. I tried to scroll in a lot, but obviously since I knew I had very limited time with this, I couldn't really get a lot of money shots, which, yeah, not great. I would have loved to have a little bit of cinematic attacks here and there. So yeah, typical squad-based combat. You get loads of different units. Obviously, there is actually a fair amount of units that was playable. I'm imagining these are going to be the units that are also playable during the beta. Funny enough, we've got a list here, so I can tell you the units, right? For the Stormcast Eternals, you've got Liberators, Vanguard Hunters, Vanguard Raptors with Hurricane Crossbows, Vanguard Raptors with Long Strike Crossbows, Celestial Prosecutors, Celestar Ballisters, Evocators, Annihilators, Stormdrake Guard, Lord Celestant, and the Knight Vexillor. For the Uruk Cruel Boys, you've got the Gut Rippers, the Manskewer Pork Boys, the Hobgrot Slitters, Beast Skewer Killbow, Breaker Boss on a Mayabrute Trogoth, the Marshcrawler Slogoth, the Merknob, the Swampcrawler Shaman, the Killer Boss, and the Killer Boss on a Great Gnashtooth. I know this might not mean a lot to some of you guys listening, as you're coming from a Warhammer fantasy setting and don't know too much about Age of Sigmar. Don't worry, I will have some breakdowns regarding these units in future videos. You do have a fair amount of units to play around with, and all of them will have their own abilities that you'll have to upgrade to be able to use, by the way, which can be a little bit annoying because it is a key resource. I don't know if 2 resources is enough, or if splitting out all the stuff around is that good. Again, until I am able to actually get into this properly, move around the keybinds and actually play without a time constraint, I won't be able to judge certain things until that, you know? Alright, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about what I like and what I don't like, because I can already have some pretty good first impressions around this. When it comes to like, the rosters themselves are pretty varied. I'm actually quite a big fan of that, as it's not a lot of Stormies, it's not a lot of Cruel Boys, just to be able to, you know, confuse people. You basically have, like, the full Cruel Boy roster, but not the Stormcast Eternal one, because it's a massive book. So yeah, each of the units have their own style and flair. I like the fact that they've got their own abilities, and it makes it quite varied. You're going to be able to play around. It'll work very similar to the tabletop content in terms of, you know, combat. It's very squad-based and so on, so you'll know what is good and what isn't if you're used to it. Don't worry, jumping in, you'll learn pretty quickly. I found some units that I did like, which I didn't like when they originally got announced. For example, the Hobgrot Sitters were much better than I anticipated. The UI is fairly clean. There are some criticisms regarding that, don't you worry, we'll talk about criticism later. Visually, fantastic. I think that that's a really good thing. Everything looks like an Age of Sigmar game. It looks like a Warhammer product, which is very important because we've seen this before, where things get too cartoony and it just loses the feel of what our grim, dark settings usually are. Even then, it's not too grimdark, but that's because it's Age of Sigmar, which is more of a high fantasy type of setting. You can queue up multiple units to be recruited, which is fantastic, mostly because there are some games of this style which don't do that, and it's kind of annoying because I don't want to keep going back just to set a unit to recruit. This will obviously depend on the units that you do have available to you, obviously, and, well, if you have the resource. Because the resource, you're going to have to be careful of not wasting it too much, because you have to build up the other buildings, you have to get everything else sorted. It's one of these things where, since it's used in so many different areas of the game, so many different aspects, don't get overzealous, don't start spending it too much. Combat fluid. From what I've seen, the animations are cool. I didn't actually see any problems in terms of, you know, clipping and stuff like that, which is great. Obviously, we did see that developer interview where they did talk about all this stuff that they've worked on animation, and it's good to see that in practice. Audio-wise, yeah, the cool boys sound like orcs, or uruks as they're called in this setting, which I still think is kind of silly, but hey, copyright, you know? And the Stormcast sound good too. Music in the battlefield is pretty good. There is a little bit of a scare with a booming crescendo when it comes to like the stats at the end of a match, so just be warned about that, because yeah, it was freaking loud. I wouldn't really be able to comment on match length considering that, well, yeah, I had a crash and the other one was just really quick. I don't know who I was playing against in the first one, but despite the fact that we weren't recruiting extra units, barring our starting limit, yeah, I don't know. But, you know, if the average match is going to be around 30 minutes, that's not too bad considering, well, you know, a game of Warhammer is an hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3, depending on the setting and the size. But I will say that it is quite fast-paced. You're going to need to think quickly, as it's very easy for you to get overwhelmed, and there are cases here where I do get overwhelmed. Put it this way, I started having major few lag issues, and it kind of goes down south for me quite quickly, which is kind of annoying because it's something that I couldn't really help. It's literally just the program that I was using, that whole parsec thing. Believe me, if you ask creators, 9 out of 10, they'll tell you they absolutely despise that program. I have 1,000 download, and for some reason, yeah, it just wouldn't work. I'd say the majority of the units do feel fairly balanced. There are some that feel very, very strong for what they are, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The main thing is we've only been able to see 2 out of the 4 base game factions, so it's going to be very samey. When the beta launches, this is an open beta that you guys can play on the 7th, it's still going to be feeling fairly samey because, yeah, you know, it's going to be Uruks versus Stormcast. You can do Stormcast versus Stormcast, I imagine, but, you know, it's going to feel the same. You're going to see the same 2 factions over and over. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if they're doing an open beta for this, I really do hope that they have plans for future open betas, mostly because, well, you know, the other 2 factions will need to be seen, and if they're looking for a little bit of help regarding the Stormcast and the Uruks, it's likely that they might need a little bit of help for the other 2 factions. That is no way a bad thing. It's actually more of like, yeah, another open beta would be great with the other factions to see how everyone plays. And if you're a fan of the Stormcast, you'll be able to play against everyone, basically. Now I'm going to talk about some things that I don't like, and I'm going to say this in the most honest way possible. Well, in the beta, since we couldn't play around with keybinds and stuff, a lot of common keybind controls just felt very dated. Put it this way, there were abilities tied to WASD, right? That meant that you moved around the camera and so on with your arrow keys, which I don't know about you, but I haven't done that since, I don't know, 2000 or something. So it really threw me off and it was annoying because I would accidentally hit controls and so on. And yes, I am fully aware that you can change that with your own internal settings, but I don't know. I feel like it should be standard with the WASD key settings, where arrow keys should literally not be used. It's one of these things where no modern game, as far as I've played, and I've been playing a lot of games recently, don't use the arrow keys. The arrow keys are kind of redundant. You know, a lot of people, especially people who play a lot of RTSs, who play a lot of MMOs, you know, games where you're going to be kind of fast-paced. Yeah, you know, you've got your hands on WASD at all times. You've got the control keys around there, so Q, Z, X, RF, all that type of stuff. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's one of those things that does annoy me. I will be very, very honest there. Modern key binds are the most important thing. Now, going into controls is the fact that, see, when you see like abilities on screen, right, there is no information about that, right? This is something which is really annoying because I'm going to have to click on the ability. So say, for example, there's ability that's key bound to Q. I'll hit that, then it will tell me what it does, and then I have to hit it again. I don't like that. I really don't like that. Because double keying is something that I myself am not used to. I'm not sure if some other games do it that way, but it's something which I see fairly often here, where, yeah, you're going to have to double key. Or if you're looking at units, it doesn't really tell you the stats. If you look at upgrades, it doesn't tell you what the upgrade does. It's like, I don't want to double key. That wastes precious time. That wastes, yes, a split second, but it's not a feature that I like. Usually with RTS stuff, you just kind of mouse over and that's it, and you'll be able to tell, which is something that you're usually doing whilst you're doing other stuff. Or, you know, you could go into your settings to be able to, you know, check it out prior. So hopefully there is some form of encyclopedia, but even then, it feels like you're going to have to kind of learn everything before you jump in. Now, there was one thing which I absolutely did not like. The charge key was also the retreat key, yeah, which is kind of annoying. Retreat is also focused on singular units. I'm not sure if that was a bug or not, but let's go with a charge system. You want to charge in your units, great, charge, there you go. The same key being focused on retreat, meaning that you might hit a charge with another unit by accident or something, because you had to double key again. It felt annoying, I'm just not going to sugarcoat it, because there was a lot of mistakes to be made there. Again, the dev didn't really have this issue, but that's someone who works at Frontier, so it was easier for them because they've played this game before. The tech tree basically offering no information also was just kind of frustrating. It's like, oh yeah, this ability, what does it do? It's something which can actually throw you off and make you start making certain mistakes. Why am I going to get an ability which is worthless to me, or at that situation is worthless to me, better yet said, when I could be spending the resources elsewhere? Because one thing that you should know, and I've been repeating constantly, those two resources that you have are your main resource. You're going to use them for abilities, you're going to use them for tech, you're going to use them for units, you're going to use them for buildings. You don't want to buy something that you don't actually need. So again, I really hope that a encyclopedia or something is available so you'll find out everything if you're one of those types of people that like to read before jumping in, like I am. It's always good to know what you're going to be dealing with, especially when it comes to certain things. Now, when some units come into play, they all feel pretty good. I feel like everything kind of matches up quite well. The Storm Drake Guard is very, very, very strong. Like, it was demolishing pretty much a lot of stuff that I was throwing at it, so it's very hard to tell early on what counters what. So, you know, again, stats, this is why it's important to see stats. This is why it's important to see abilities and so on, because it caused me a lot of problems. It basically made me look like an absolute amateur, which, again, no problem losing. I don't mind that type of stuff. I play a lot of Warcraft 3. There are people who are better than me in the ladder, that's for sure. But I felt like there was nothing I could do to combat it. So the no context becomes a bit of a problem. Again, I had very little time with this game, so you guys will have a different experience. But again, if the developers are listening, a unit encyclopedia, just a general encyclopedia, is very, very good. A lot of companies do that because it lets you learn those things, if not just, you know, a little bit extra, you know, being able to just mouse over something whilst you're looking at other locations, to be able to get a gist. I'm not going to complain too much about it because you never know, that's something that they could have planned, or maybe that's something that was actually in the build and it just wouldn't work for me because Parsec is such a garbage program. Now, with the complaining aside, I will say in a general sense I did enjoy what I was seeing. Again, visuals, very, very important for Warhammer, and it felt like Warhammer, it sounded like Warhammer. Again, I know that might not sound like the most important thing, but you would be surprised how many Warhammer titles come out and just don't have that feel. Gameplay-wise, fun. Honestly, like, I wanted to play more. It was actually quite disappointing, but these events are usually quite time-gated because they've got loads of influencers and other people. So, yeah, I couldn't stay on all the time, which, yeah, is sad because I was having fun. Even as I was getting my ass handed to me a few times, I would say that, yeah, this was an experience which I really did enjoy. I thought that this game is fairly good from what we've seen so far. Obviously, we'll be able to know more as we get closer to a release build. We don't know when release is, as that will be the full experience, that will have everything, that will have all the issues ironed out. Hopefully, that will have all the other stuff too, right? The other factions. When it came to both factions, because I did manage to play both of them play fairly differently. Obviously, the Stormcasts are more hard-hitting, but less in number. The Cruel Boys are less hard-hitting, but you can swarm and overwhelm your enemy. And I think that works out quite well. If I have to pick an early favorite, I'd have to say the Cruel Boys, because that's the faction that I play on the tabletop myself. So, yes, there's going to be a little bit of a bias there, but it just felt like it was easier for me to have a bit of flow with and move around to take over places and just in general feel like I was doing something a little bit more engaging. The Stormcast themselves, they focus on hard hitting, right? It's very obvious with the Storm Drake, as you've probably been able to see at this point in footage, but it's not only that, just they feel like they hit hard. It's like the tabletop, right? They have that tabletop feel, they have that general Stormcast vibe where they're going to be very, very strong. I don't know if I can comment too much on the factions until I'm able to see the other two. You know, 4 is the general thing that usually gets released with these types of games because it presents a different variety, different gameplay. Maybe one of the other two factions ends up being my favorite compared to the Cruel Boys and the Stormcast because the gameplay is different. Because the factions are supposed to play different. The factions are supposed to have their own styling. And that's going to be good. If we have 4 completely different factions with their own style of play, that's going to allow for people to be able to have variety, have a lot to play with. How are you going to counter someone else, right? So if you're Stormcast, how are you going to counter the Cruel Boys? How are you going to counter another Stormcast player? Which I feel is a match that I would have loved to have done. I would have loved to do Cruel Boys versus Cruel Boys and Stormcast versus Stormcast, just to see how the same faction does against itself. I do feel like this game has a lot of potential. The story presented itself well, even though it's only one mission, and it was relatively small. I think it was around 10 to 15 minutes, but then again, a lot of it was just trying to learn the controls more than anything else. But there was good story beats there. It was something that kept on moving, so I feel like there is something there. Again, same thing with the multiplayer. It was quite engaging. It was really good. I enjoyed myself. I really did enjoy myself. It's something that I could see a lot of casters even covering tournaments for. Hopefully there's some sort of way to be able to spectate in games. Right now it was only 1v1. I believe the open beta will have 1v1 and 2v2. I would like to see some bigger style matches. I'd love to see a 4v4 map. I don't know if that's something that the developers have planned, but big hectic battles, you know, that's very Warhammer. Even with Age of Sigmar, people love playing bigger games. What do you guys think about what you've been able to see so far? Are you looking forward to the open beta on the 7th? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I know that the devs actually are looking at the influencer videos regarding these types of things, so if you want to leave some feedback, that might be a smart thing to do. Let the rest of the battle play out, and yeah, I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day, guys.
They're all dead, boss. All of them, boss. All dead. Mustn't hang about. Smash it! But not retreating! Let's go! Time to shoot something. Some more obstrots is sneaking about. Time to stop up. Bolt boys ready, boss. You have our arrows, boss. Are you stealing our magic, mate? Losing our magic? That gets his pinching the best parts.
Slitters is the best!
The boss say to get going. Need a plan!
close! Get inside, boss!
They killed them boys! Slice inside! The Gits is killing your boys! The boys have lost their magicals! They is stealing our magic thing! Losing our magic know-whats! They is stealing our magic thing! You got some more bolt boys to boss about!
Time to get going!
Where should we stick him? Shut your mouth! Boss! Time to start up!
Slickers at the ready!
We need to leg it!
Move yourselves!
You got some more bolt boys to boss about!
Get inside, boss! Enemies here, boss! The scumbos are here!
He's gonna lose the breath of more! They is stealing our magic thing! They's trying to stop the big green! Shut your mouths! Who do you want shooting? Move it! The boss says so! Listen up! Order! We're out some boot leather! What's that, boss? Arrows and choppers.
Let's go!
You is the master strategist!